the freedom of moving around the world in our own home, you know. It's not like visiting from one place to another and you stay in a hotel and you're a tourist. I lived in these places. I lived in the Solomon Islands. I've lived in Australia and Africa and many, many other places because I'm living in my boat.
To Know the World, a video memoir of an early modern multi-hull pioneer. Hello, I'm Jim Brown, here in the cockpit of my old Sea Runner trimaran Scrimshaw, hoping to share with you the results of a recent visit that I had with my old friend Mark Hassall. Mark is perhaps the most illustrious of my design clients. He's built 3 of my boats. The first ended its life, short, happy life, in a shipwreck, and the other 2, he sailed around the world. We're talking about 2 circumnavigations here. We'll hear just brief accounts of some of the incidents that occurred on those voyages, because this is a very preliminary first cut, a rough edit of a much greater volume of material that's available from that visit. Mark is quite a character, as you'll see. He has a really unique philosophy of life, and he has firm opinions. He knows where he stands, particularly when it comes to multi-hull sailing.
I'm not comfortable in a monohull. A hull with a big heavy keel, at least you'd want wing nuts on the keel. You know?
So you could get rid
But
of
it might be too late. You might have to dive under to get the wing nuts off so you can drop the keel off so you can come home and tell the story about the storm. I mean, I don't hold any punches. I mean, I like a vessel that can't sink out from under me.
After Mark's second world cruise, he swallowed the anchor, as sailors say, and moved to this highland lake in the Altiplano of Guatemala, a beautiful place called Atitlan, surrounded by volcanoes. He bought a piece of property on a very steep hillside and built himself a home near this little Indian village of San Marcos Atitlan.
Well, I remember that.
Mark and I have been friends for many years, and we had a great time for several days during early June 2004, swapping yarns in the company of Katerina, Mark's Indian wife. This is the first boat that I ever designed for Mark, the first one that he built to my plans, and it was the first boat that I ever designed. But it was lost shortly in a shipwreck. They got caught in an anchoring predicament at Anacapa Island, which is about as steep as Joe Hudson's fanciful portrayal here. Bonnie said that it was very much like being shipwrecked for a week on a desert island. It was her first cruise.
And the wind filled the sails, and the next thing I know, we're 10 feet up on the rocks of Anacapa Island. These big rocks had just come right through the hull, the main hull, and the boat was obviously finished. So there we were. Oh, so we stripped the boat down. There was a cave and it was starting to rain, so we stripped everything we could out of the boat. I just bought a television set. This was the first time I'd had one on a boat, 12 volter. So we took the battery in the television and we watched television in the cave, and this went on for a couple of days, and finally a fishing boat came by and they said, "Do you need help?" And we yelled out at them, "Yes, get hold of so-and-so," who I was working for at the time. So he hired a fishing boat and came out, and 3 days later we get everything on board and picked up all the stuff and got it all on the fishing boat. And heading back, Bonnie looked at me. She says, "You know, between us, we're $2,000 in debt. You owe $2,000 on the boat you just wrecked. You don't have a place to live." She says, "I've got the Volkswagen. I owe $2,000 on it. That's $4. but I do have an apartment and a garage, and we'll just put everything in there, and we're going to both have to go to work and build another boat so we can sail around the world.
This is Bonnie, who made the entire first trip with him, an extremely patient and game woman. And this is the boat, a 37-foot Sea Runner, one of the first. We'll have now Mark's account of a few of the incidents from that first voyage.
I remember passing the tip of Catalina, and then that night it was what they call Hell's Half Acre. Oh my God, it's a shallow spot in the ocean, and the waves were busting, coming clean over that boat. They took the dinghy right off the side deck, a little lightweight plywood dinghy I'd made, and in the morning there was the painter, the rope, hanging out the back of the boat, and there was a piece of the bow hanging on the end of that rope, man. And I thought, shit, what did I get myself in for, you know? But then things calmed down, and the waves got bigger and quiet, and we started surfing that boat. And my God, that boat would pull up on those waves and just take off and take off and take off. And it was only 13 days. I was in Hawaii, you know? I mean, she just took us there so beautifully. It was just the most gorgeous trip that I could ever imagine after we got out of Hell's Half Acre. And we got one of the worst hurricanes New Zealand had had in years and years and years. And so, boy, I fought for my life. And finally, we set drogues, and these waves were tremendous. I mean, they had to have been 50 feet, and maybe even higher. And we're surfing down them with a drogue out and a tiny little 80 square foot of storm jib tied out to the float bow and balanced the whole thing. But we made it. And next morning, the waves were tremendous, and we had a light breeze from the south, and we're surfing down these big waves like on a reach, you know, and we got into Whangarei, and we spent 6 months through the hurricane season there.
Mark finished his first voyage here in the Rio Dulce on the Caribbean coast of Guatemala, where he built this wonderful little jungle home in an area where there were no roads and no electricity, and where he became friends with Trevor Long.
And we talked for hours and hours, and in the course of the conversation, Mark mentioned that he had been on the river, I don't know, it was like 10 or 14 years. It had been a long time. And he was thinking that he told me that he wanted to sail out, that he had sailed into the river, and he always wanted to sail out. And I thought, Mark, you've been on the river a long time and turned into a river wizard, and maybe it was time to head back out again. And so, lo and behold, the next morning we wake up, and Mark just launches out of bed, and he says, I've got it. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a 62-foot trimaran, and I'm going to put my wood shop on it. And I'm going to take rosewood, and I'll be able to go around the world again, and I'll be able to make money as I'm going around the world. I'll be able to survive, trade my woodworking and my skills for money or food so that I can make it as I go around the world. And it's going to be 62 feet, and it's going to look like this, and it's huge. And he began to design it out, and he got all excited. And then the next thing he said was, by the way, Trevor, can I borrow $2 for lunch?
This is the boat that I drew for Mark to accommodate his wood shop and several tons of rosewood for a 9-year circumnavigation. The boat was really built in the jungle. No roads and no electricity. Let's hear a few incidents from the voyage.
Man, and it blasted our ears. We couldn't hear a thing. Then there's smoke all through the boat. And I get the fire extinguisher and I pull the pin and my God, let's put out the fires.
So you'd been hit by lightning?
We had been hit by lightning.
Oh, great.
And man, it hit the triadic stay. And it came down the outside shrouds. Luckily, we were in the tent. I wasn't pulling, it happened after I pulled down the Genoas because the head stay was a lead too. So I came down the head stay and it blew a 6-inch hole in the bow of the main hull, okay? It blew about 10 finger-size holes in the bottom of the main hull. It blew a 3-foot hole outside of that float and a 2-foot hole outside of that float.
At the shroud chain plates?
Butt blocks.
Oh, it's the butt blocks.
Where the shroud chain plates hit.
And all the fasteners.
Well, see, there must have been some air behind the butt blocks.
Oh,
and the
metal
air
fastener.
expanded and just blew it to pieces. There was no butt blocks left.
I think it was the fasteners, Mike.
Well, maybe
Mark.
the fasteners,
I
the
think-
screws, because
yeah.
I had screwed it all
Yeah,
together there, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah. So, we got Seth on the pump, and he's pumping away like mad, and we got the other pump going. The alternator had burned up, and all the wiring in the boat had burned up. All the lights had burned up. The compass had turned around, was facing, I had to go the reciprocal. The amp meters had switched over, and my 80 cassettes that I'd recorded the music and dance of Kiribati, my 80 cassettes got erased. So, we were heeling over. That float, the leeward float was full of water. We were heeling over. I had a little tiny bit of sail up. I put some storm jib up, and I managed to start the engine, the diesel engine. I took some jumper cables. The batteries didn't blow up. I took the jumper cables, and I started the diesel engine.
Wow, that's rare because the batteries usually blow.
And off we went.
Man.
Well, I had a really big ground, an aught cable from the aluminum mast past the batteries and to a zinc plate on the bottom. And that, I think, saved Seth, and it saved the batteries. He was like standing over the batteries when this thing hit. But we had that electrical tent.
Yes.
And so we made it into Kosharai. And there was no question I wasn't going any further.
Yeah.
We came into Lila Harbor, and I dropped the anchor. The water ran out of the other float. The boat balanced itself. I dove underneath and plugged up the 6 holes with underwater epoxy putty with my mask, and we were okay. And I was offered a job. They said, could you fix the electricity in the wood shop at the high school? Yeah, I'll give it a try. I'll come down tomorrow. So tomorrow, I fixed all the electricity in the wood shop, and it hadn't been working for 6 months. So he says, we're hiring you. $10 an hour. Wow,
that's
I never made $10 an hour in my life, man. I says, all right. So for 2 years, I spent my time fixing the boat and ordering stuff from West Marine from the United States, and they'd ship it to me,
Wow.
And I got all this stuff, and I replaced everything, and we beached the boat on a few tires on the coral when the tide went out in there. We painted the bottom and patched it up, and we finally got it ready. But it took 2 years. I mean, of course, I was teaching school at the same time every day. It was kind of interesting, the Israeli security, because I was like 60 miles off of Israel, and they had 2 gunships just off my view. Sleep with us every night because there was no wind at night, so we just shut down, went to sleep. And always I could see these 2 ships. 3 nights in a row, the 2 ships were with me. Finally, I got close enough that I picked up the VHF radio, and they said, why didn't you call us sooner? And then just about that time, 2 airplanes came over, and they missed my mast by maybe 3 feet. 2 jets. Vroom, passed us by. And I had set the GPS and was sort of tired, and I left myself 5 miles off of Ashkelon Marina, and I went by. So now I'm in front of Gaza, and a gunship comes out there, and they aim this great big thing on me, where are you going, where are you coming from? Well, Ashkelon's back that way, and so we finally got things straightened out with them. and we got into Ashkelon Marina. And once we were in, the harbor master just took care of us. Man, he took us to get our papers done. We had a wonderful time in Israel. I stayed a year, and here was this white-robed gentleman speaking to the two customs officers. And they sort of indicated, wait a minute, have a seat. So I sat down, and I smiled at the robed gentleman, and they were just talking away. And when they finally finished talking, he came over, and he kissed me on the forehead, and he left. And the two customs officers, their mouths dropped open. And they said, what did you want? Oh, you want to haul out at the private yard over there? They got on the telephone, called him up, says, you've got permission to take him out. And there's just a big smile all the way around. Go on, get out of here. And I left. No charges, no nothing, man. I got the permission right off, and I found out later that one of these white-robed men kisses you on the forehead. You are blessed. Kirsten's asleep in her bunk that I made for her in Australia, down in the wood shop, you know. And I'm up on the seat up there and just kind of enjoying the trip. We wing and the Jennies, you know, and about a 10-knot breeze, and we're moving along all right. And I had mounted in Hawaii, I had mounted the wind generator out on the float stern, you know. And you know those curved wings, and they're all wet. And I'm stark naked. It's hot. I just got a black t-shirt on, right? And so I thought, well, I'll walk out there and untangle the electrical cord, right? It had gone around a few times. And so I walk out on the wing, and my feet slip, and I hit my butt. And I went over the outside of the boat. I grabbed the Samson post with one hand, and I'm hanging there on the outside of the boat, my feet dragging in the water, and I can't make it. My arthritis, my hand just let go. And I'm in the water, and the boat has gone, and I watch the little light in the doghouse go and disappear over the horizon. And there I am. And I thought, oh my God, I wonder if there's any barracuda, because you know, you and I have both heard that barracuda will take your pee-pee off, right? And I didn't want that to happen, not yet. And so, no.
Not yet.
No, barracuda would be near shore, probably, because there's nothing for them to eat in the middle of the ocean. Okay, how about sharks? Well, I didn't get cut. I'm okay. And I'm not going to worry about sharks. So, the next thing is, Kirsten doesn't know how to sail. I wonder if there's a chance in hell that she can come back and find me in the middle of the night, or find me, period, you know. And I thought, well, maybe there's a possibility. So I better relax and conserve my energy, because I was sort of with my head out of the water, treading water, you know. But it's salt water, so I float. And I laid my head back, and I thought, okay, I better go to sleep. And I fell asleep. I figured, before that, I thought, you know, well, I've had a really good life. I guess if this is it, you know, because the chances are pretty slim. And so then I laid my head back, and I went to sleep. Some time passed, obviously, and I woke up. And she had gone off that direction, and I looked over sideways to the waves, and way out there I saw this little white light. I mean, it had to be 3 miles away at least, or 4 maybe, and I saw this white light, and it was going, obviously, under motor, past me, toward back the way we'd come from, right? And it passed me and went up another maybe 10 degrees past me, and suddenly all the lights went on the boat. It was my boat. And the decks were lit up, the spreader lights were on, the running lights were on, everything was on. And I screamed. And you know, it was one of those foggy nights and pitch black dark, and all I could see was the light. And my God, she heard me. She had motored down and turned on all the lights. There was no noise from the motor. And she heard me. And she pulled the throttle out, and she turned around, and my yelling quite fairly frequently, she came right up to me, and I climbed on the back of the boat. And I said, thank God. She goes 300, and she's mad as hell, man, cussing at me. She says, goddamn, how could this happen? You know, he never taught me how to sail this boat. What am I going to do? But I finally settled down, and she says, I've got to find him. I've got to find him. So she puts her hand on the throttle, and she throttles it up, and she goes 150 degrees, and she says, now I've got to turn it over to my inner mind. She says, I have the power to do this. And so she motors and motors and motors and motors and motors, and then it came to her, her hand automatically pushed the throttle in, and the motor's just idling, and you can't even hardly hear it. And she says, my God, I'll turn on all the lights. She turned on all the lights, and she heard my yell. She heard my yell. And she started up again, and she turned around and went back and to the side, because she'd been going 150. She was a long way away from me. As far as from here across the lake to the volcano, she was away from me. And she came up and picked me up. And so that was sort of the Overboard, right? Kind of a miracle, huh? Man.
Yeah, I gotta say
that was it.
I gotta say, you told me that story on the phone from Egypt.
Oh my God.
You know, and after it was all over, you said, Jimmy, it was just not my time to go.
I guess not. It wasn't my time to go.
Well, our discussions turned philosophical after that night, but the next day was so nice that we decided it was time for a couple of old sea dogs to go for a swim.
Oh boy, I can't. You know, there's the pusher stroke. Have you ever seen that?
A rope overhang the swimming pool on the Big Sur River.
Oh yeah.
You used to go up that damn thing hand over hand with your feet sticking out straight.
Oh well.
Those were the days, huh?
Those were the days.
Oh, this is great. What is it? What brings it on? What gives you the focus to go so directly toward these goals that you've set for yourself?
Well, you know the old quote, the power of positive thinking, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of think about myself as a burro, a donkey. You hang a carrot out in front of his nose, and I always hung my own carrot, you know, and I followed it because there were definite things I wanted. I wanted to know the world. Yeah. You know, from a little tiny kid, I used to play with water in the front yard when I was 6 years old, you know, and build dams and build little sailboats and things like that. And I always feel that I wanted particularly to know the waters of the world, you know, at least to have the whole world in a concept of my own. And so every time a decision would come up, I would automatically go in the trail that would lead me to what I wanted. It just means you have to guide yourself positively to what you want. And there's nothing out of reach.
I was asking Mark how it was he managed to do all of this voyaging without being wealthy. And we had to go inside, so he said, I want to read you something by Sterling Hayden.
That. To be truly challenging, a voyage like a life must rest on a firm foundation of financial unrest. Otherwise, you are doomed to a routine traverse, the kind known to yachtsmen who play with their boats at sea. Cruising, it is called. Voyaging belongs to seamen and to the wanderers of the world who cannot or will not fit in. If you are contemplating a voyage and you have the means, abandon the venture until your fortunes change. Only then will you know what the sea is all about. I've always wanted to sail the South Seas, but I can't afford it. What these men can't afford is not to go. They are enmeshed in the cancerous discipline of security, and in the worship of security we fling our lives beneath the wheels of routine. And some form of working activity that will yield a sense of accomplishment. That's all in the material sense, and we know it. But we are brainwashed by our economic system until we end up in a tomb beneath a pyramid of time payments, mortgages, prosperity, gadgetry, playthings that divert our attention from the sheer idiocy of the charade. The years thunder by, the dreams of youth grow dim, where they lie cracked in the dust on the shelves of patience. Before we know it, the tomb is sealed. Where then lies the answer? In choice. Which shall it be? Bankruptcy of purse or bankruptcy of life? Sterling Hayden. That's a good one.
Mark has always been a tremendous physical specimen. Here he is bungee jumping from a bridge in Australia at age 62. We used to call this guy the human spring, but now he's all crippled up with arthritis and he has a very fragile heart, but he also has an unbreakable attitude.
Age is an interesting thing to face. I never thought about it much. I just kept going and doing my things one after another. And then I got a little ill, and miracles happened, and they got me to the hospital in Guatemala, and the doctor said, this boy is very sick, and he needs a quadruple bypass and a couple of valves, and we can't do it here in Guatemala. And I said, no way, come on. I'd faced that in the Indian Ocean. I mean, when my time comes to go, this was almost 3 years ago. He gave me a year max. Well, I'm still here. I mean, when he gave me a year, I ran home back to the lake and I built myself a new house. Oh my God, what was it like falling off the boat in the middle of the night in the middle of the Indian Ocean with this lady sailing away from you who didn't know how to sail the boat? I thought for a moment about the possibilities of being rescued from this situation. I had no clothes on, or a black t-shirt, in the middle of a pitch black dark night, and I know the chances. We've gone over them. Boating people know the chances. They're way out there. Let's win the lottery 6 times before these chances show up. And I said, well, I've lived a good life. I've lived a very full life. And so I guess this is it. And I am here to tell you about it. So it was kind of a miracle. But it's positive thinking. The mind has powers that none of us will ever understand. But it's such a gorgeous world that what a fabulous opportunity to have this experience, to be in this world at this time. I'm kind of looking forward to that next view, Where do we go from here? Nobody seems to really know, and I don't know, but it seems like it's got to be good.
Mark Hassall died December 10th, 2007, and was laid to rest with the full 9-day native ceremony in the cemetery above San Marcos Atitlan, Guatemala.
Fair winds, old friend. You showed us how.